Hello everyone. Today we plunge into the darkest, most consequential political mystery in ancient Chinese history, the enigma of Qin Shi Huang's deathbed edict at the Dune platform. This is not a trivial debate over royal succession, it is a story of unbridled ambition, calculated betrayal, and a single hidden decision that condemned the first unified Chinese empire to a violent, sudden collapse. For over 2 millennia, the world has accepted one canonical truth: the ruthless eunuch, Zhao, the ambitious prince Huhai, and the terrified prime minister Li Si conspired to forge the first emperor's final edict, murdering the rightful heir, Fusu, and seizing the throne. But in the 21st century, a stunning archaeological discovery has shattered this long-held narrative, forcing historians to ask a earth-shattering question: was the edict actually a forgery, or did Qin Shi Huang himself choose Huhai as his successor? This is the untold tension-filled truth behind the fall of the Qin dynasty, a tale of power so toxic it destroyed an empire built over centuries in just 3 years. In 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang, the man who had conquered 6 warring states, standardized writing currency weights and measures, built the Great Wall, and forged a unified Chinese nation, embarked on his 5th and final imperial inspection tour. At 49 years old, the emperor was a man consumed by 2 obsessions: preserving his absolute power and cheating death. For years he had sent thousands of alchemists and scholars across the empire to search for the elixir of immortality, rejecting any talk of his own mortality. His health, however, was deteriorating rapidly. The grueling journey across harsh terrain, combined with years of stress and toxic quasi-immortality potions, left him gravely ill. By the time the imperial procession reached the Dune platform, a remote, desolate outpost in modern-day Hebei province, Qin Shi Huang collapsed and died without warning. His death occurred far from the capital, Xianyang, in a land still simmering with resentment from the recently conquered 6 states. The empire was fragile, and a sudden, unannounced imperial death, without a clear heir, would spark instant rebellion, chaos, and the complete collapse of Qin's hard-won unity. Only 3 men knew the truth of the emperor's death: Li Si, the all-powerful prime minister and architect of Qin's strict legalist system; Zhao, the chief eunuch, imperial secretary and guardian of the emperor's jade seal; and Huhai, the emperor's 18th and youngest son, who had begged to join the tour against his father's initial wishes. Li Si, a brilliant but deeply cautious statesman, made the fateful decision to conceal the death. He feared that news of Qin Shi Huang's passing would embolden disloyal nobles and trigger a wave of uprisings. To maintain the illusion that the emperor was still alive, Li Si ordered the procession to continue its journey as normal. The emperor's body was placed inside a sealed, climate-controlled carriage, and trusted eunuchs pretended to accept memorials, approve edicts, and serve meals, just as they had before. To mask the growing stench of decomposition in the summer heat, Li Si's men loaded barrels of rotting, salted fish onto the imperial cart, a macabre detail that reveals the desperate, secretive atmosphere surrounding the Dune platform. This veil of secrecy created the perfect window for one of history's most brazen political coups. Before his death, Qin Shi Huang had written a single vital edict as his condition worsened. The edict was addressed to Fusu, his eldest son, who had been exiled to the northern border to command 300,000 troops alongside General Meng Tian. Fusu was a virtuous, wise prince, deeply critical of his father's harsh legalist policies, mass-forced labor projects, and crackdown on Confucian scholars. He was beloved by the military, respected by scholar officials, and widely seen as the only man capable of softening Qin's brutal rule and stabilizing the empire. The edict ordered Fusu to return to Xianyang to oversee the imperial funeral and take his rightful place as heir. This was not a vague suggestion, it was a clear, formal designation of succession. The edict was stamped with the emperor's jade seal, the ultimate symbol of imperial authority, and placed in Zhao's custody to be delivered to Fusu. But Zhao, a man consumed by resentment and ambition, refused to send it. Zhao had a long, bitter vendetta against General Meng Tian and his brother Meng Yi, who had once sentenced Zhao to death for a serious crime, only for Qin Shi Huang to pardon him. Zhao knew that if Fusu became emperor, the Meng clan would rise to total power, and he would be stripped of his position, disgraced or executed. Worse, Fusu's moderate policies would erase everything Zhao had gained under the emperor's authoritarian rule. So Zhao made a choice that would change Chinese history forever. He would destroy the original edict and forge a new one that named Huhai emperor and ordered Fusu and Meng Tian to commit suicide. He first approached Huhai, a young, naive, and politically inexperienced prince who had never held real power and was entirely dependent on Zhao Gao's guidance. Initially, Huhai hesitated, citing filial piety and the injustice of displacing his elder brother. But Zhao Gao manipulated his greed and fear, telling him that if Fusu took the throne, Huhai would be reduced to a powerless noble, stripped of his title, and possibly killed to secure the new emperor's reign. Faced with the promise of absolute power, Huhai abandoned his scruples and agreed to the conspiracy. Next, Zhao Gao turned to Li Si, the final piece of his treacherous puzzle. Li Si was loyal to the Qin Empire and had dedicated his life to its success, but he was also terrified of losing his power and legacy. Zhao Gao delivered a ruthless, irrefutable argument. Fusu favored Confucianism, a philosophy directly opposed to Li Si's legalist reforms that had formed the foundation of Qin's governance. If Fusu became emperor, Li Si would be dismissed from his post, his life's work would be dismantled, and he would face disgrace or death. Li Si, torn between loyalty to his deceased emperor and self-preservation, made the worst decision of his life. He joined the conspiracy. Together, the three men forged a new edict in Chen Shi Huang's name, falsely accusing Fusu of unfilial piety and Meng Tian of treason. When the fake edict arrived at the northern border, Fusu, a man of unwavering filial piety, refused to doubt his father's command and took his own life immediately. Meng Tian suspected fraud and refused to comply at first, but he was later arrested and forced to commit suicide in prison. With their rivals dead, Huhai was declared the second emperor of Qin, and Zhao Gao seized complete control of the imperial court. For 2,000 years, this account, recorded in Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian, the most authoritative and rigorously researched historical text of early China, has been accepted as absolute truth. But in 2009, a groundbreaking archaeological discovery upended everything we thought we knew. A collection of Western Han Dynasty bamboo slips, known as the Zhao Zheng Shu Book of Zhao Zheng, Qin Shi Huang, given name, was unearthed and studied by scholars at Peking University. This text, written less than a century after the Qin dynasty collapsed, contains a radically different version of events. According to the Zhao Zheng Shu, as Qin Shi Huang lay dying at the Dune platform, Prime Minister Li Si and Imperial Chancellor Feng Kuji knelt before him and warned that naming Fusu as heir, who was hundreds of miles away at the border, would spark a coup by rival nobles. They begged the emperor to name Huhai, who was present at the Dune platform, as his successor, to ensure a stable transition of power. The text explicitly states that Qin Shi Huang replied with a single word, qi, meaning approved. This account portrays Huhai's succession as completely legitimate, a decision made by the emperor himself, not a forgery by corrupt courtiers. This clash between two ancient sources has sparked a fierce debate among modern historians. So which version is true? Let us weigh the evidence with strict historical accuracy. Sima Qian, author of Records of the Grand Historian, was a meticulous, impartial historian who accessed imperial archives and first-hand eyewitness accounts. He had no political motive to fabricate the conspiracy. The Han Dynasty, which replaced Qin, had no need to invent a forgery to justify its rise, as Qin's tyrannical rule was already widely condemned. The Zhao Zheng Shu, by contrast, is not a formal historical chronicle, but a political text, likely written during the early Han Dynasty to shape public memory of Qin's collapse. Many scholars argue that the text was crafted to portray Qin's succession as legitimate, emphasizing that the dynasty fell not from an illegal coup, but from inherent tyranny, thus reinforcing the Han Dynasty's moral authority. Further evidence undermines the Zhao Zheng Shu's credibility. If Huhai was the rightful heir, why did he and his allies feel the need to secretly conceal the emperor's death, brutally murder all of Huhai's royal siblings, and purge loyal generals and officials? These actions are the hallmarks of a usurper, not a legitimate emperor. The truth, supported by mainstream academic consensus, is clear. The edict was forged. Qin Shi Huang never intended for Huhai to rule. His decision to exile Fusu was a punishment for criticizing his policies, not a rejection of his claim to the throne. Fusu was still his eldest son, the traditional and legitimate heir, and his final edict ordering Fusu to return to Xiangyang is irrefutable proof of his succession wish. The Dune platform conspiracy was not a stroke of fate, but a calculated evil act of betrayal that destroyed the Qin dynasty. Huhai's reign was a catastrophe of unprecedented scale. Under Zhao Gao's manipulation, he imposed harsher taxes, expanded forced labor for the unfinished Fang Palace and Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum, and executed anyone who dared to oppose him, including Li Si, who was publicly cut in half at the waist and had his entire family exterminated. Within 3 years, widespread peasant uprisings erupted across the empire, led by Chen Sheng, Wu Guang, Xiang Yu, and Liu Bang. The once mighty Qin army collapsed, and the capital, Xianyang, fell to rebel forces. In 207 BCE, Huhai was murdered by Zhao Gao's men, and the Qin dynasty, which had taken centuries to build, was erased from history. The Dune platform edict, whether a forgery or a misrepresented order, remains the single most fateful decision in Chinese imperial history, a dark reminder that power without morality and ambition without loyalty can destroy even the greatest empires. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient China, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic history. See you next time.